What is going on, Headliner Nation? Jake, Fantasy Headliners. Hopefully everyone's doing well out there today. We're talking about our running backs. We're going to start and sit for Week 14 fantasy football, also known as Bye-mageddon, because yes, even though we're on the verge of the fantasy playoffs, there are 6 teams that are on a bye this week. We have the Atlanta Falcons, the Chicago Bears, the Green Bay Packers, Indianapolis Colts, New Orleans Saints, Washington Commandos. They're all on bye. You will not have the running backs from those teams. That's not ideal because we also have some locked and loaded studs this week, the guys that you start each and every week that have some pretty difficult matchups as well. Not ideal, but we're going to be diving in to each and every matchup. Before we do, I have to let you know about some potential free money sitting out there. Right now, over on Prize Picks, Justin Herbert is currently set at only a half of passing yards. That's it, 1/2. If the dude goes out and throws for 1 yard, you win that square. So if you haven't signed up for Prize Picks yet, now is the time to do it. Use referral code Headliners when you sign up. All you have to do is make an initial $10 deposit. We'll match your deposit all the way up to $100 though, and you can have some fun here end of season with us. Don't miss out on the Justin Herbert free square. But now is the time when we dive into each and every matchup. We're kicking it off Thursday Night Football. Got the Las Vegas Raiders and Los Angeles Rams. And it's nothing like starting it off here with the #1 overall running back in fantasy football in Josh Jacobs. And I'm pretty sure you know that you should probably be starting Josh Jacobs. He now has 3 straight games with at least 150 plus total yards. Again, he's done this now for the 2nd time this season. It's not the first time we've seen a stretch like this from him. He's already over 1,600 total yards on the season. The guy is absolutely a monster. As of right now, no other running back in the NFL averages more touches per game than Josh Jacobs, sitting at 23.7. Now, over his last 3-game stretch, he's averaging 31 touches per game and a whopping 33 per game since we've heard about this quote-unquote calf strain. I think he's playing through it pretty well. Now they're going up against the Rams. They're 25th in the league in points allowed to opposing running backs at 18.7 per contest. When it comes to injuries, got Brandon Bolden. We got Amir Abdullah. They're banged up on the bench as well. But even though Josh Jacobs is probably going to be on the injury report all week long, even in a short week because of this calf strain, he seems to be playing through it pretty well, and I'm not overly concerned unless the doc tells us that we need to start being concerned. At some point, this dude's going to come crashing back down to earth. This pace is not sustainable whatsoever, but there's no way you can sit Josh Jacobs right now. Which takes me to the Los Angeles Rams side of things. And honestly, I feel sick to my stomach. I mean, you know that every once in a while you just say something or you do something, you're like, man, I don't like that. And I can say that because we got Cam Akers listed as a starter, right? And that makes me sick even saying it. I don't even know if I can say it anymore here. I mean, he's finally doing something, which is a good thing, which means a lot of people are going to be coming out of the woodworks and be like, see, I told you that Cam Akers was going to be good. Totally ignoring the fact that he absolutely sucked huevos the last 12 weeks of the season. But hey, at least we can kind of look at him here a little bit, right? I think so. I don't have the warm fuzzy about this one. Now, obviously on the year, he's averaging under 10 touches per game, but over the last 3 contests, averaging 13 per ball game, and is coming off a season high last week of 18 touches in a game. This is one of those no other option scenarios in LA. A lot of people are hurt. Not a whole lot of options. Even the quarterbacks are dropping like flies. Seems like Cam Akers is going to be the guy who is the main beneficiary of some added touches, and now he gets a matchup going against the Raiders. They allow the 6th most fantasy points to running backs in fantasy football at 23.7 per game. Listen, you see that he's listed here as a start. Sorry, I cannot say the word. It's been bad. If this was a week in which we didn't have 6 teams on bye, more than likely he would not be a start. But there's a lot of people out there going to be looking for other options that maybe they normally wouldn't start. And with a matchup like this, with the volume we've seen here over the last few weeks, we put him in there and we pray that this doesn't absolutely backfire on us. Kyren Williams really not doing a whole lot. He's totally being out-touched. They're really not utilizing this kid at all. Seems like they're going to, continue to stick with Cam Akers. Let's hope for some touchdowns, please, because the efficiency just not going to be there. All right, let's move on to Sunday football. Now we have the New York Jets and the Buffalo Bills. Another one of those games that's going to be exciting to watch on Sunday, but maybe not overly exciting from a fantasy perspective when you talk about the running backs, at least, right? We'll start off with the Jets. We do not know as of yet the status of Michael Carter. Does he return this week? Because honestly, right now, Zonovan Knight, Bam Knight, whatever you want to call him, has been playing pretty freaking well. 118 total yards on 20 touches in week 13, and has now showed production in back-to-back ball games. And that's exactly what we're looking for. The last thing that you really want to do in fantasy football is just constantly wing it every week. Oh, this guy played well last week, he's going to play well this week. No, we try to find the consistency, and we're starting to get it a little bit here with Zonovan Knight. In the 2 games, he's averaging 18.5 touches per game, which would rank 12th in the NFL as of right now. Now, it's a difficult matchup, right? They're going up against the Buffalo Bills, who are 23rd in the league against opposing running backs, allowing only 18.7 points per game. But there's really no rush for them to bring back Michael Carter at this point. Really, if anything, if Michael Carter returns, it's probably going to hurt the production of Ty Johnson more than it's probably going to hurt the production of Zonovan Knight. But that offensive line still hurting quite a bit there in New York. They're having to throw the ball a lot. Mike White was close to 60 pass attempts last week, which is fine, because if he's finding that success down the field, the defense can't stack the box against the running game. That'll open up things for the running backs here in New York. Now, when you have a running back that's averaging 18 touches a game with back-to-back totals of over 10 fantasy points per contest, it's really hard to sit somebody like that is really in a position to get similar volume. But I'm going to temper expectations here a little bit. He's going to be a little bit lower in the ranks, more of a flex play, bye-week fill-in at best, just due to the overall difficult matchup of this ball game. One of those ball games that has turned into be such a huge rivalry because the Jets are actually better now. This is one of those games that's just fun to watch and may not be as high scoring as a lot of us want it to be. On the other side of the football, you got Devin Singletary, you got James Cook. Did we just see the James Cook takeover for the Buffalo Bills? Well, we should have. But is it a safe bet? No, not at all in this backfield. He had a season high 20 touches and 105 total yards, his best overall game of the year for sure, while Devin Singletary went 13 carries for 51 yards and not much else. But what really makes this difficult is the snaps were almost identical. It's the passing work that really boosted the production of James Cook. 6 targets, 6 receptions, 41 receiving yards. We need that each and every week. Now, the Jets defense, they're allowing right around 19.5 fantasy points per contest, 21st in the league. Offensive tackle Dion Dawkins, questionable. Another one of those teams where the offensive line is just hurting. Now, Singletary did a whole lot of nothing in week 9 against this same Jets defense, and honestly, I expect a lot of the same here. We could see a little bit more James Cook in this contest than we did in that contest, but unless you're in a full PPR league, I'm really not considering James Cook either. In a very difficult matchup, really hard to trust the guy who's really only had one solid good game here in the NFL as of late. So I'm going to temper expectations once again, sit both of these guys. How about we go down to Cleveland and Cincinnati? My Manscaped matchup of the week. That's right, as soon as this video is over, it is getting dangerously close to Christmas time. You need to head over to manscaped.com. Find yourself something for the holidays here. Get a present for a loved one checked off the list. Get something for yourself to put under the tree as of right now. Use promo code HEADLINERS at checkout for 20% off and free shipping over at manscaped.com. But this could be a matchup of Nick Chubb and Joe Mixon. Now, we'll start it off here with the Cleveland Browns and Nick Chubb, who's currently sitting at running back 4 overall on the season, but is really kind of coming off a downer of a week against the Houston Texans. And to be honest, I'm a little bit worried about Nick Chubb and the overall offense of the Cleveland Browns. Deshaun Watson was not good at all. Not even close to being good, which is expected. We talked about this for weeks upon weeks upon weeks. Listen, the guy hasn't played football in almost 2 years. I don't expect him to come out and start throwing for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns and opening up a run game to where Nick Chubb's going to run wild. That's going to take some time to have happen. But in the meantime, it could really hurt the potential output of Nick Chubb. Now, until Watson can really get back into game form, there's going to be a lot of lost possessions in this offense due to the passing game inefficiencies, and that absolutely sucks. It's going to limit scoring opportunities. The touchdown upside is going to go down. I mean, heck, Deshaun Watson barely completed 50% of his passes against the Houston Texans last week, and now they're going against Cincinnati. Cincinnati, they allowed 20 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. We know this is still another team dealing with multiple offensive line issues, but there's no way you can ever sit Nick Chubb. Even in a bad game last week, he still scored 8 fantasy points, which I know is not great, but it's better than like 3. He faced Cincinnati back in week 8, had 23 carries for 101 yards and 2 touchdowns. Plus, we're still not seeing so much Kareem Hunt that we're worried about volume going the way of Nick Chubb. We need this game to remain close. If it does, Nick Chubb has that opportunity to give you a safe floor game once again. For Cincinnati, it sounds like Joe Mixon is going to be coming back and finally be cleared from the concussion protocol here in week 14. That's what should happen. But honestly, same thing goes as we talked about for the last couple weeks. This is a plug-and-play backfield. I don't care if it's Joe Mixon. I don't care if it's Samaje Perine. Whoever is the starter in this backfield is going to be a start in fantasy football. Samaje Perine has been playing great as of late. 150 total yards last week. Joe Mixon averaging just under 20 touches per game on the season. While we just saw Samaje Perine go out there and have 24 a game over his last 2 starts, even though he's still sitting under 10 total touches a game for the year. Now they're going against Cleveland, though. And Cleveland gives up a lot of points to opposing running backs. 25.4 per game, second most in the league. Like I said, we're really watching Joe Mixon and his return. As good as Samaje Perine has been, this isn't one of those backfields where I trust both of these guys as a start. More than likely, with Mixon back, he's going to command the most touches. If he sits, we know the touches are just going to Samaje Perine and really have little else to worry about. As of right now, I'm kind of hoping that the Bengals have a second half lead in this ball game, because if you're a Mixon owner or a Perine owner, you could rack up a lot of garbage time points there late as they're just running out the clock. Kind of plug and play though, right? So if Mixon is to sit, he will no longer be a start. Obviously, a lot of those X factor points going the way then of Samaje Perine, and he would be a definite start for me if Mixon is out. How about the Houston Texans, Dallas Cowboys? We'll start off with Dameon Pierce, and at least he got back into the double digits, right? For the first time in 3 weeks. 18 carries for 73 yards, 3 receptions for 22 against Cleveland last week. Was kind of hoping for a little bit more in that matchup, but it's clear that he is still the number 1 guy in this backfield. He's just not getting a whole lot of touchdown opportunities with Kyle Allen under center. He's still averaging right around 19 touches a game. Still an overall solid play each week, but the floor is just continuing to plummet. And that's not a good sign when you're going up against the Dallas Cowboys, who allow 17 fantasy points per game, 4th fewest in the league to opposing running backs. And over the last 3 weeks, they've faced Dalvin Cook, Saquon Barkley, and Jonathan Taylor, and held all 3 of them to under 85 rushing yards. That's not a good sign for Dameon Pierce's ceiling here this week. We know that Brandon Cooks and Rex Burkhead, Derek Stingley, they're all still questionable to play, but we've seen him produce in tough matchups before. This isn't a great start. He's not going to be ranked overly high, but in a week like this, you probably don't have a better option than Dameon Pierce. He's still in the start column. For the Dallas Cowboys, we said it last week. This is a backfield that can have 2 weekly producers at the running back position. Opposite of what we were talking about with Cincinnati, right? Both Zeke and Pollard can be weekly starts and produce. They both finished inside the top 8 last week. Both get touches each and every week. Both get touchdown opportunities. Both see receiving work. Actually, both of these guys last week were ranked inside my top 14. That seemed a little bit bold for some people at the time, but I wasn't even high enough on them because, like I said, they both finished top 8, averaging right around 16 touches per game apiece. Going against Houston, they allow 26.7 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. That is most in the NFL. And actually, I'm going back over to Prize Picks, and I'm going to smash the over on Zeke's rushing prop, which is currently set at 64.5 rushing yards. That's a number that he has beaten now in back-to-back ball games, and I do expect the Dallas Cowboys to have a late lead in this ball game, rely heavily on the running game, and that benefits Zeke Elliott, and that's why I'm going to go make that bet over there. When it comes to injuries, it sounds like Tyron Smith, offensive lineman, could return to practice this week, which is huge. He's one of the best offensive linemen in all of football. That would be a big bump there to the running game. But really, the benefit of these guys is regardless of the game script, both these guys are still going to be used. It's not like one is the ground guy and one is just the pass catching guy. They're both used all 4 quarters, regardless of game script, and that's what I absolutely love to see, and that's why they're both starts here once again. For Minnesota and Detroit now, we'll start off with Minnesota and Dalvin Cook. Now, he has almost 1,100 total yards and 8 touchdowns on the season. But for some reason, doesn't it feel like he's just struggling overall this year? And I really don't know why. I mean, he's had a touchdown in 6 of the last 8 games he's played, but it's really the big games, the huge point total games that we have not seen here this year like we've seen in years past. He only has 2 games on the year in which he's rushed for over 100 yards, but he's still getting the touches, averaging just under 19 touches a game on the season. Now they're going up against the Detroit Lions, who are all the way down to 20th in the league when it comes to points allowed to running backs at 19.5. This team started the year as being one of the teams that you had to start your running backs against because they were that bad. They were top 5 in most points allowed to opposing running backs. So as you can see, they've come a long way, dropping all the way down to 20th. Now, offensive lineman Christian Darrisaw, still questionable to play. They really need him back for that offensive line. And Dalvin did well back against this team in week 3. But like we said, this is a different Lions team than what was playing on the field in week 3. For his career, Dalvin Cook is averaging 104 yards rushing and a touchdown against these Lions. We're going to need that again, but you obviously start Dalvin Cook. How about his opponent, DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams? Another one of these backfields that you can afford to start both of these guys, right? I mean, it finally happened. We have been saying for weeks. I've said it on YouTube. I've said it on Twitter. The big game for DeAndre Swift is coming. And more than likely, it's going to happen on your bench. And you're going to get upset about it, but don't worry. Hopefully, that is the sign of things to come. That once he actually gets the volume back, he will be somebody that we can use going forward. That could be what just happened because he just had 18 touches last week. That's the most he's had in a game since week 1, had 111 total yards and a touchdown. Now, obviously, we want more from DeAndre Swift, but he's had back-to-back games with at least 6+ targets, which is a great sign. But I'm not going to completely write off Jamal Williams. This dude is still involved in this offense for sure. Just had another 11 touches and another touchdown last week. That is now 14 rushing touchdowns on the season for Jamal Williams. He's one of the emotional leaders of this team and will continue to have a role. He did when DeAndre Swift started the season hot. Nothing's going to change now. A matchup going up against the Minnesota Vikings. They allow the 12th most points to running backs at 21.3 per game. Center, Evan Brown, questionable to play. Would love to have him out there. This isn't a changing of the guard, though. I don't want to go out here and overhype DeAndre Swift as retaking over a backfield. This is more like the addition of a second guard instead of taking one away. This is not some rotation where it's one or the other. They're both going to get touches. They're both going to have touchdown opportunities. And the Detroit Lions don't suck anymore. They're scoring a lot of points, and these guys are benefiting from the touchdown. So as of right now, in a decent matchup, I have them both as starts this week. What about the Philadelphia Eagles, New York Giants? We'll start off with Miles Sanders, currently the running back 12 overall on the season, but kind of been struggling on the ground here as of late. In 3 of the last 4 games he's played, he's failed to break 55 rushing yards and hasn't had more than 17 receiving yards in a game since week 4. That is not ideal. He's still getting touches, averaging right around 17 touches per game on the year, but we've started to see that number drop here as of late. It's down to 13 per game in 3 of his last 4 contests. Now, he had a huge game in week 12 against Green Bay, but aside from that, has really struggled over the last month of the season. Now a matchup going up against the Giants. They're a middle-of-the-pack defense against running backs, allowing just over 20 fantasy points per contest. No major injuries of concern here, though, but at this point, we need TDs. Show me the touchdowns for Miles Sanders. Luckily, the Giants have given up 6 rushing touchdowns over their last 3 games played. We need another one here. Fingers crossed, Miles Sanders still a start. His opponent, Saquon Barkley, currently running back 6 overall on the season, but now has 3 straight games in which he's failed to break 81 total yards in a game. Now, luckily, he has touchdowns now in back-to-back ball games, and that's saving you somewhat. The offensive line is still a huge issue in New York. He's averaging over 23 touches per game, second highest in the league. He just can't go anywhere with them because he has no holes to run through. He's failed to average more than 3.5 yards per carry now in each of his last 3 games played. He's being stopped at the line of scrimmage. Now a matchup against Philadelphia. They allow 20.7 fantasy points per contest to opposing running backs, which is 17th. But over the last 3 weeks of the season, since making the additions to the defensive line, they've limited Jonathan Taylor, Aaron Jones, and Derrick Henry all to under 85 yards rushing. Not a good sign once again for Saquon Barkley. We mentioned all the injuries on this offensive line, and he's really going to be touchdown dependent until they get healthier. This matchup is not ideal, but there is no way that you can sit Saquon Barkley ever, right? I mean, if you got him, you got to start him. How about the Baltimore Ravens and Pittsburgh Steelers now? We'll talk about Gus Edwards, Kenyon Drake, Justice Hill. It doesn't really matter. Honestly, if I'm being completely honest, I just wanted to skip over this entire backfield because I'm not that interested. We've had, like 2 games all year in which a running back in the backfield of the Baltimore Ravens really did anything. I mean, we really kind of thought they'd be more involved once Lamar Jackson went down. That wasn't the case because we didn't even have a running back with more than 7 carries. Now we have a different quarterback in Tyler Huntley for what seems to be, days to weeks now, but he's prone to running himself. He led the team in carries last week with 10, and it's not like this is an offense that's scoring a lot of points and we're getting a lot of touchdown opportunities because that isn't happening either. Now a matchup going up against Pittsburgh. They allow 19.8 fantasy points per game, but when you have a backfield that you need to split that 3 ways between, that is a bunch of crapola right there for your fantasy roster. Ronnie Stanley, their best offensive lineman, still questionable. We know about Lamar Jackson. Patrick Queen on the defense, also injured. This is like one of those lottery ticket situations. You know there's a chance that you're going to be a winner, but more times than not, you're going to scratch that ticket or look up those numbers and have absolutely nothing to show for it. That's kind of how I look at this backfield right here. For Baltimore, for Pittsburgh, I don't really understand Pittsburgh's classification of injuries, I guess you could say. So Najee went from being hurt to 18 touches and really not splitting much work in a backfield in week 13, despite all the Jaylen Warren truthers out there that thought he was going to get some big, huge workload. Benny Snell still out-touched him 7-3. But overall, Najee didn't look half bad. He's still averaging 17 touches a game on the year and has actually looked better since they've said he's been hurt. This dude played worse when they would come out and say that he was fully healthy. He's had at least 9 fantasy points now in 4 straight ball games. Going up against Baltimore, not an easy matchup. They allow the 7th fewest fantasy points to running backs at only 17.3 per game. Not a lot of other injury concerns here that are affecting Najee Harris. I mean, he struggled against Baltimore last season for the most part. He struggled at times this season, but as of right now, kind of slides into that low-end running back 2 column to where you can still start him, but you don't expect a whole lot. As a solid running back 2 in a bye week situation, that's where Najee Harris is going to remain. For Jacksonville and Tennessee now, let's talk about Travis Etienne, who's down to running back 18 on the season. And the game that they just played against Detroit kind of got out of hand, and they didn't really have an opportunity to give more touches to Travis Etienne. It didn't help that he fumbled one of his first touches of the ball game either, but he still played in 88% of the snaps. He's averaging over 14 touches per game. But now he's going against Tennessee. Tennessee allows only 17 fantasy points per contest to opposing running backs. That's 6th fewest in the league. They have only allowed over 100 yards rushing one time since week 3. And that isn't to just one guy. That's an entire team, what they're allowing. This is a great run defense for the Tennessee Titans. Now, we know that when it comes to injuries here, not a whole lot to speak of in Jacksonville. Obviously, we're watching Trevor Lawrence, who, if I'm being honest, looks like he got folded in half last week. I thought for sure. I was sitting right next to the doc, and I was like, this dude just broke something in his leg. The human leg is not meant to bend that way right before halftime. And then sure as hell, right after halftime, dude comes jogging out and plays the rest of the ball game. He's literally made of like chewed up now and laters. Like that's what his tendons must be made of, because I was completely shocked. But this is another one of those stud running backs that more than likely you kind of have penciled in to an automatic start each week that he's healthy, but it's not a good matchup for him whatsoever. Hopefully we don't get disappointed with the point total here, because with the potential upside of a Travis Etienne, you got to start him. How about his opponent, Derrick Henry? Now let this sink in for a second. Do you want a WTF stat of the week? How about this now? Derrick Henry has just as many passing touchdowns as he does rushing touchdowns over the last month of the season. That's pretty dang crazy. 2 touchdowns in the last month and less than 100 yards rushing now in 4 games straight for King Henry. What is going on? Now, he only had 13 touches last week in a game before they really couldn't run anymore in Tennessee because A.J. Brown and the Eagles were out there just like mushroom stamping people all over the place. The Jags, they allow the 13th most points to running backs, though. That's a 21.3 per contest. Hassan Haskins, backup running back, he's questionable to play. Treylon Burks, questionable to play as well. Now, somehow, despite all these struggles, the Titans still lead in their division, right? They're trying to still fight for the playoffs, but if they want to have any chance possible, they need to get Derrick Henry going once again, and this could be one of those matchups to kind of right the ship. Obviously, you start Derrick Henry. How about the Kansas City Chiefs and Denver Broncos? Another solid game for Isaiah Pacheco. Now, back-to-back games with at least 80 total yards and a touchdown. A little unnerving, though, to see Jerick McKinnon go out there and get 8 carries as well. Would love all those touches to go the way of Isaiah Pacheco. If they want to, involve Jerick McKinnon maybe a little bit more in the passing game, then so be it. Especially since he took those 8 carries for 51 yards, though. Now, is that huge? No. But what that does to a coaching staff in the NFL is, hey, I got a guy that when I give him touches, he's producing, which means I'm going to continue to sprinkle in touches for this guy, which in turn takes touches away from Isaiah Pacheco. Had, Jerick McKinnon gone out there and been absolutely stuffed at the line of scrimmage, not doing anything, more than likely over time, those touches will migrate towards Pacheco. So with Jerick McKinnon doing all right, that kind of hurts Isaiah Pacheco. Now, this isn't a team that's going to, dedicate 20 plus carries a week to a running back. That's just not how they work in Kansas City. So we need all that we can get. Now they're going up against the Denver Broncos. They allow 18.1 fantasy points per game to running backs. That's 23rd in the league. Guard Joe Thuney is questionable to play. But here is my concern. I'm going to lean in for this one because it's kind of the unknown. Now, there's a chance that Melvin Gordon is elevated to the main roster here this week, and that worries me for this reason. They're going up against the Denver Broncos, the team that just waived Melvin Gordon. Now, if this doesn't sound like a damn storyline, then I don't know what does. Do I think that Melvin Gordon goes out there and takes the job from Isaiah Pacheco and leads the team in rush attempts? No. But if they're on the one, do you think that maybe they give Melvin Gordon an opportunity and Pacheco gets vultured of a touchdown? Like, that would not surprise me if he is elevated. That's one concern I have there. That better not. Damn it, Andy Reid, don't. I know you on airplanes drawing mustaches on people, but don't be vulturing our touchdowns and sending them somewhere else for a guy that's nobody's going to be starting in fantasy football. As of right now, still leaning on Pacheco. Their opponent, Latavius Murray of the Denver Broncos. And in a week where we need running backs maybe more than ever, do we want to trust the starting running back of the Denver Broncos? Probably not. I don't know if I want to trust anyone in Denver as of right now. Heck, even Courtland Sutton is banged up now, and you have a 3-way split backfield with Latavius Murray, Mike Boone, and Marlon Mack. Now, sure, Murray is leading this backfield in touches by far, but dude is averaging under 3 yards per carry in 3 of his last 4 games and has only gone over 4 yards per carry 2 times since joining the Denver Broncos. That's what screams inefficiency, and he needs huge volume to even have an opportunity. They're going against Kansas City. It's not a bad matchup. They allow 21 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. We know the wide receivers are banged up here. The offensive line is decimated. Russ's abilities are banged up at this point. But this dude has been in Denver for 7 games and has only gone over 66 yards rushing one time. Only has 1 touchdown over the last month of the season, and is on a team that just can't score. Literally, they have scored under 17 points in 7 of their first 8 games and 10 total times all year long. I'm not really interested. I'm not interested in Latavius Murray this week. I'm going to go ahead and just say it that way. How about the Carolina Panthers, Seattle Seahawks? D'Onta Foreman back off of his bye week. Should be good to go once again for your fantasy lineups, but we need volume because this isn't an offense that's going to score a ton of points consistently either. And unfortunately, we have Sam Darnold back under center once again. Hopefully, we get to see what we saw prior to the bye week. In that game, D'Onta Foreman had 24 carries for 113 yards against the Denver Broncos. And that was with Darnold at quarterback. So, hey, fingers crossed, right? But now they're going against Seattle. Good matchup for them because Seattle allows 25.1 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. That's 4th most in the league. Like I said, coming off the bye week, the team had some time to rest up, heal some of those nagging injuries, so no major injuries of concern. But D'Onta Foreman has been the clear leader in this backfield, and because of that, because of the volume that he sees, it makes him a decent start each and every week. 100+ rushing yards in 4 of his last 6 games also helps. Even though there's really no passing work to speak of, we need the big volume once again in a matchup like this. Gonna start D'Onta Foreman. His opponent, DJ Dallas, I think, right? Because it really sucks that we lost Kenneth Walker. But really, the entire backfield of the Seattle Seahawks got banged up last week. Even DJ Dallas himself left the game injured last week, but was forced to return due to more injuries in the backfield. And that does not overly excite me. Do we see a ton of volume here this week? How much volume can you really give a guy who's already battling an injury? And they're talking about it being a high ankle injury. This is not something where he can go out and just get 20 to 25 touches if that's the case. Plus, Geno Smith is having no problem throwing the ball through the air right now to Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. Sure, they're going up against Carolina, and Carolina allows over 25 fantasy points per game to running backs. I get that, but Seattle can still beat them just by using their passing game alone. I don't think I want to put my fantasy playoff chances at risk by starting a running back on a team that he's really not needed to produce on for them to win when he's already dealing with an injury. To me, that just seems like an opportunity to go out there and get burned. So for myself, DJ Dallas, not somebody who I want to trust as of right now. Be sure to watch the videos throughout the week. If something changes and by, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, he is a 100% full go, then all of a sudden we take a look at DJ Dallas. But until I get word of that, I'm kind of staying away. How about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and San Francisco 49ers? On paper, seems like a great matchup, right? You got Leonard Fournette and Rachaad White on one side. And is this another one of those backfields that could really have 2 guys that could produce weekly? It's kind of one of those backfields that I feel like everybody thinks they know, but in reality, they don't know anything about. But here are the facts. Here's what we do know. This is a split backfield, and both of these guys are going to get weekly carries and weekly targets as long as they're healthy. Both of them are going to hover right around 15 to 16 touches a game. Both are going to struggle running the ball on the ground because the offensive line is hurt so bad. Both are also going to be reliant on catching dump-off passes from Tom Brady due to the offensive line not being able to hold their blocks and let more routes develop down the field. And then lastly, both of them going to be reliant on touchdowns. Now, unfortunately, this is one of those crappy matchups for both of them going up against the San Francisco 49ers, who allow only 12.9 fantasy points per game to running backs. That's lowest in the league. We mentioned how bad this offensive line is playing due to injuries. So this is kind of what I envision in this ball game. The San Francisco pass rush is going to get to Tom Brady with ease, which means the routes down the field won't develop, which also means they're going to have to dump off a lot of passes to Rachaad White and Leonard Fournette. That could be a huge boost to everybody who plays in full PPR leagues. But it's really going to come down to touchdowns. which one of these guys can score the touchdown? We just saw it last week. Leonard Fournette was leading in fantasy points the entire game until the last 10 seconds of it when Rachaad White caught a touchdown because Chris Godwin's touchdown was called back due to penalty. It was almost a flip script. It's really going to be hard to nail down this backfield each and every week. It's going to be a crapshoot. If you're in a full PPR league, a half PPR league even, they become a lot more appealing. If we know this on the outside, you have to expect that Tampa Bay and Tom Brady know this as well. They know he's not going to have time in the pocket. They're going to develop a lot of hot routes, a lot of check downs, a lot of dump offs to the running backs, and we're hoping for some big plays. And that's why both of them are in the start column for me this week. Their opponent, Christian McCaffrey. Obviously, we know that we start Christian McCaffrey. He's coming off another week in which he finishes the running back 1 overall, 146 total yards and a touchdown, added in 8 receptions, which is great. He's active all over the field, averaging over 18 touches per contest there in San Francisco. Going up against Tampa Bay is not easy, though, right? They allow the 3rd fewest fantasy points to running backs at only 16 per game. We know that there's no more Jimmy G. It's going to be Brock Purdy. Is that going to be Purdy for the running game? I know, that sounded cheesy. I even thought about that mid-sentence. I'm like, this is stupid, but I still said it anyway. Now, sure, Brock Purdy is Mr. Irrelevant, but in this offense with these playmakers and these weapons, he is all of a sudden going to become relevant once again. And one thing we can count on are some dump-offs to CMC, carries in the backfield, really no one to overly split them with. He didn't look unhealthy. He looked pretty good out there. We know the volume that touches, the production is going to be there. We're still starting Christian McCaffrey. How about the Miami Dolphins, Los Angeles Chargers, Sunday Night Football? And we'll start it off with Miami and the WTF happened to the running game in Week 13 Dolphins. I mean, we knew that they were missing multiple starting offensive linemen in a very difficult matchup against the San Francisco 49ers. But to have this backfield total 8 carries for a game, even that low of a number was a huge surprise to myself. Now, neither one of these guys really overwhelmingly dominating touches. Obviously, it looks like Jeff Wilson, still the clear leader in this backfield, has the slightly higher edge of maybe having the highest chance of bouncing back in a great matchup here this week, because the Chargers, they allow 25.1 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. That is 3rd most in the league. This is a great opportunity for a bounce back game for the Miami Dolphins running backs. You got Tua, who's dealing with an ankle injury. Gaskin is questionable. You got Austin Jackson. Terron Armstead on the offensive line, still questionable to play. Really hoping to at least have one of those pieces back, but you have to think, with Tua not 100%, slightly dealing with that ankle injury, could we see more running this week? Maybe not in the pocket so much trying to avoid a pass rush, really relying a little bit more on the running backs this game. That's what I'm hoping for. Hoping to have some pieces of the offensive line back. I'll go ahead and I'll start Jeff Wilson this week. Their opponents, Austin Eckler. Obviously, you know, you're starting Austin Eckler coming off a down week when you think of Eckler standards. Anyway, right, 102 total yards, 5 receptions, but no touchdowns. Had his 2nd fewest targets in a game over the last 2 months, though, with only 6. Averaging 18 total touches a contest, going up against Miami. They allow the 14th most fantasy points to opposing running backs at 21 per game. The loss of Trey Pipkins and Corey Linsley, though, on the offensive line is proving to be a problem, right? They need more help there on the offensive line. Both those guys still questionable to play, along with guard Zion Johnson as well. They need some help here on the offensive line. This could be another one of those ball games where we see 10 to 15 targets going the way of Austin Eckler, but we already know we're not sitting him regardless. But that'll take us to Monday Night Football, New England Patriots, Arizona Cardinals. Let's start off with Ramondre Stevens' season here of the Patriots. We really got saved late in that ballgame with a few receptions because it was not looking good last Thursday against Buffalo. But now he has still scored at least 10 fantasy points in 10 straight games. That kind of consistency alone makes him start worthy. Plus, he's had at least 6+ targets a game for the year as an average. That is great usage of him in the passing game. Averaging just over 18 total touches a game, so we know volume isn't a concern. Now he's going up against Arizona. They allow the 11th most fantasy points to opposing running backs at 21.4 per ball game. Tackles Isaiah Wynn, Yadni Kajust, they're still questionable to play. Would love to have better options there on the offensive line, but Arizona really struggles containing pass-catching running backs. that could really benefit the likes of Ramondre Stevenson, and we know we'll start him here this week. He is a weekly start for your fantasy lineups, and then we'll end things off with James Conner, who's coming off of the bye week and his best game of the season in week 12, right? He had 25 carries for 120 rushing yards, 3 receptions for 20 yards, and a touchdown in the passing game, and has now had at least 11 fantasy points in 3 straight ball games, some of which were pretty difficult matchups at the time against the Rams and the San Francisco 49ers. And really, it's because of volume. 16 plus touches now in his last 3 games, but in 2 of those 3 games, he had over 24 touches a game. But now they're going up against the New England Patriots. Another difficult matchup for James Conner because the Patriots allowed the second fewest fantasy points to opposing running backs at only 15.3 per game. This is a team that lost offensive lineman DJ Humphries before the bye, but most of the other injuries on this team benefit the likes of James Conner, Rondale Moore, Greg Dortch, Zach Ertz. What that means is less options in the overall offense, more opportunities for James Conner. Now, do I love starting James Conner this week? No, I do not. I do not at all. This is going to be a risky game for James Conner owners, but he has performed well in similar situations at times this season. What I'm hoping for is by having DeAndre Hopkins and Hollywood Brown out there on the field, they're able to get more scoring opportunities, really helping boost the floor of James Conner. That's what I'm looking for. I'm worried about it, but he is a verge start for me here in week 14. All right, but there you have it, my running back starts and sits for week 14 fantasy football. I know it's going to be a little bit rough with some of these matchups and all the bye weeks that you're having to deal with. Just a reminder, our rankings will still be out Thursday prior to the Thursday night football game. So if you're looking at a few different guys, those will be out to maybe help you make your last minute lineup decisions. If you enjoy the content, do me a favor, hit the like button down below. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. Even though we're in week 14, we continue to get subscribers all year long because we don't stop. When the season ends, we still do a lot of fun things. We have a lot of giveaways in the off season to keep you interested in the channel. So make sure you stick around for a while. We're gonna have a lot of fun this off season. We're looking forward to it because right now we're on the way to some fantasy football championships and making some noise in the playoffs this week. But hopefully you guys have a great rest of your day here today, a great week overall, and we'll talk to you later.